35 to 37, Jesus concluded a conversation with an expert of the law who was really struggling with the concept and the practice of loving his neighbor as himself. And it was reflected through his question when he asked Jesus, "Who is then my neighbor?" And Jesus replied not with an answer, but with a story. Don't you just love that about Jesus? He answered this man through a parable. And it goes something like this. It goes, once upon a time, there was a man who was on his way from Jerusalem to Jericho. And in the middle of the way, in this perilous road, he was ambushed by bandits. He was beaten up. He was stripped naked. All his stuff and possessions were taken away, and he was left for dead on the side of the road. And not too long after that, a priest. And you can imagine in that moment how this expert in the law had high hopes and expectation that here comes the hero who's going to stroll in and show this Jewish man that this is my neighbor and I'm going to go ahead and help him out because he's in need. And this priest came and saw this man and possibly heard this man's whisper because he had no more energy, crying out for help. And in that moment, when he saw this man, he was possibly thinking, oh my gosh, this person, somebody did this to this person. I wonder if those people are still here. And instead of being concerned about his fellow Jewish man who is laying down on the floor half dead, this man who's supposed to represent God, this man who's supposed to understand that law better than anyone else, to love his neighbor as himself, decided to close his eyes, decided to close his ears because it was inconvenient and it was dangerous for him. So he decided to keep on going on the other side of the road, turning a blind eye to the need of his brother. And not too long after that, a Levite, also in the line of the priest, and somebody who also represents God, somebody who also ought to know that law better than anyone else. Same situation, saw the same man, had the same exact response. He decided to keep on going. And the last person is the least expected to do anything within the story if you understand the cultural context of the time. Jesus made the villain of the story, according to the Jews, to be the hero. And it was a Samaritan man who was hated by the Jews, who Jews considered to be less than human and to be unclean. As a matter of fact, a Jew would go into the temple of God and would pray the demise of this entire people group. This is the kind of hatred and racism that existed between the Jews and the Samaritan. And yet Jesus told the story like this, that this good Samaritan saw the man and did not ask if he was Jewish or he was Samaritan. He just saw a man, a person, a brother in need on the side of the road. And the golden rule is very simple. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And he saw this man and he thought to himself, this man needs help. And he immediately went down and went to him and bandaged up his wounds and pour wine and oil on his wound as an antiseptic to be able to stop the infection, and put this Jewish man on top of his Rolls-Royce donkey and proceeded to the nearest Holiday Inn. And the innkeeper, in that time, verse 35, the next day he took 2 denarii, which is, a denarius is usually the usual daily wage of a day labor. And so that means it's a 2 days worth of money. He went ahead and paid this innkeeper and told him, look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Which of these 3, Jesus asked, do you think was a neighbor, a good neighbor, to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? And the expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus told him, go and do likewise. I think this is a very crucial time for us to hear something like this. Because in a time where we cannot afford to be inconvenienced, Jesus is asking us what it means to be a good neighbor. Is to be okay with being inconvenient. It's to be okay with going the extra mile and loving on our neighbor as ourselves. To love them like the way we would love our own family. To take care of them like the way we would take care of our own family. Now, I know this is a hard concept to understand in a time that we're living in a time where hoarding is what's normal, in a time where everybody struggles in survival mode and doing their own thing. But there's a challenge for us. What would it look like for you to be a good neighbor today?